virtual act is something that I started when the pandemic started, when we were all in isolation. I was especially in quarantine during the time. I was, yeah, locked in alone without seeing anyone for almost 21 days. And so it came out of that in how to connect and find artistic sustenance, not just in terms of work or anything, but just for a creative practice. So virtual act is really an invitation to other artists and other people to commit time together and just create without judgment. Because a lot of times I feel like we start checking our ideas or comparing it to other people and just doubting. So my whole goal for this was just to use the opportunity that this time or this point in time gave us and connect with lots of artists across the world and just create for the heck of it, for the fun of it, and just share that with other people and see what new ideas that brings in. So I've had 4 of these virtual acts. The first one was with Charles, and he's here from Montreal today. Hi, Charles. Is he still here? He's somewhere here. So, for example, stuff like that. Yeah. Hey, Charles, do you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. So it's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, when we did that, like a month ago, almost a month and a half.
Yeah, we met, 2 months ago now. And for things like that, the moving silences that we presented, Charles just presented a development of that solo as well, coming out of this virtual act. And this week, so it's super cool having him here and also seeing friends from a lot of people from Bangalore, Manipur, some people here in Aizawl. We've got Vietnam, Canada. So it's really cool. It's nice that we can share this virtual space together. And this week I've been working with Vijay, who's a really awesome guy. I guess he does everything. It's really annoying. He does puppeteering, acting, I don't know, math, which is the most exciting thing as he's bringing this into the world of dance and performance. So I'll hand it over to Vijay to introduce himself and also the work while I get ready. Thanks everyone for joining in, and we'll talk in a moment.
Thanks, Josh. And thanks everyone for coming. Hello, everyone. It's really good to see so many people. Yes, I'm Vijay. I guess for people who don't know me, Josh's mathematician friend. And yeah, this has been a really exciting experience for me. It's been really, really new to kind of have a chance to work with a dancer. I mean, I've been working in theater for some time, but even then, I've never really mixed mathematics with any form of art. It's always been kind of in separate places. So this is kind of the first time that I've actually done a collaboration that involves mathematics, and that's been very interesting because I never thought of, I mean, when I worked as a mathematician, I never really explored the possibility of bringing it into anything outside of very formal math. And in a way, I think most mathematicians are kind of that way. Like we don't really feel like it's kind of, I mean, I think most people in personal conversations, when they're doing math, there's all kinds of rich metaphors that they're conjuring up from the math they're doing, but somehow we don't take that very seriously. So this was a chance to kind of try taking it seriously and see where it went. And we'll talk more about the journey of how this piece came together after the piece. I think, but in a few minutes, Joshua will perform a 20-minute piece that we created called Life Cycle of a Trivial Loop. And it's based on the explorations that we've done together over the last 1 week. So basically every day we kind of met for a couple of hours and worked together, did lots of improvisations, talked about a lot of math, and this gradually came together. So I don't want to talk too much about it now. So I think we'll start in just a few seconds. And after the piece ends, we'll talk a bit about the math and show some demonstrations, and we can have a discussion. So let me just put the spotlight on Joshua again. And yeah, I think we're all set. So enjoy. This is Life Cycle of a Trivial Loop. And thank you all again, once again, for coming. So thanks everyone. This was Joshua, where are you? Yeah, there he is.
I'm back. Thanks everyone for logging in.
Yeah, so what we're gonna do now is have a little we'll have a little discussion about the piece, and we'll also talk about some of the math involved. So maybe to Joshua, you probably want to catch your breath, right? So maybe I'll talk a little bit about how this came about, and then we can open it up, and then we'll talk a bit about some of the math that went in and how this piece came about from the beginning. So, and feel free to give comments in the chat, or also just type in and give comments whenever you feel like. There's no formalities at all. So everybody feel free to take off your mute if you want to. So yeah, thanks again, everyone. This has kind of been, I mean, this experience of working on this piece, like I said, it was really new for me because I've never really mixed math and artistic creation. And once I started talking with Joshua about some of these ideas, he took such a keen interest and got so excited. So that was really exciting and really inspiring. And then just watching what he made of these very abstract ideas. I mean, all of what you saw just now was really came out of, improvisations that Joshua did after we had discussions. And it really came from, so all of the movements really came from him. And it's really his interpretation of a lot of these ideas, which we'll talk about in a second. So, and it's interesting because Joshua, I mean, those of you who know him or don't know him, and you kind of, he's obviously a phenomenal dancer. And despite the fact that he doesn't have any like formal training in math, he catches on to mathematical concepts really quickly. So this piece, it really started at around March, just before the lockdown, when a few of us, Joshua, me, and a few other people here, were all visiting our friends Ishwar and Anushka in Pondicherry, and I think they're also here somewhere. And I had actually just given a talk at IIT about a space called projective space, and how we can understand the geometry of that space with some intuition from our body, from the way that we move. And because there was a bunch of dancers, I thought it'll be a nice opportunity to try describing it to them. So I kind of informally described these ideas, and really none of the dancers had a math background, but they I was really kind of astounded at how quickly they caught on to this basic idea. And so sometime after that, during lockdown, Joshua just asked me if we wanted to take that further and try something like this. And of course I said yes. So thanks, Joshua, for including me in this project. So maybe before we talk about, I thought I'll give a little summary of what ideas we were exploring. But maybe before that, does anybody have any questions about what you saw, or any other comments? Does anybody want to chime in?
Silence.
Yeah, I kind of figured.
Especially the shadow part of it. It was good. It was very good.
Thanks.
Honestly, I'm still trying to connect how is this related to mathematics.
Good, because Vijay can talk about the loops we talked about, or the thing you told me. I think it'll make sense.
Yeah, cool. Okay, why don't I do that? I'll just go ahead and start describing some of the math that'll clear some of the mystery. So basically, I've worked as a mathematician for a long time, and in particular, I worked in geometry. And something that was always really fascinating to me as a geometer was how the human body is constantly negotiating spaces that our mind can't really comprehend. So in addition to the space that we're all moving around in, which is relatively simple to understand, there's lots of other spaces that our brain is processing kind of inherently just when we move around, in order to make sense of all that data that's coming in. And And if we actually think about what those spaces are and what they're actually like to comprehend geometrically, it's very, very complicated. So there's one space in particular called projective space, which any physicist or mathematician is probably very familiar with. But that doesn't make it any less strange. And projective space is, it's again something our bodies are familiar with, but it's what, in terms of how you move your body, it's what enables you to do something like this. You can take your hand and rotate it 360 degrees in this direction, and your hand gets all twisted up. And obviously, one way to get out of that, one way to free yourself, is just to undo it. But your body also knows that another way is to just keep twisting in that same exact direction, and that untwists your arm. So that specific action, it's something that it's fairly intuitive to do. All of us are able to do this. But somehow, if you think about it, it feels a bit strange because your hand is just, maybe it's easier to see with a book, your hand is just, sorry, let me take off these earphones. Hopefully everyone can still hear me. So the book, you can see that as you rotate it, it's really just in the same direction, over and over again, but somehow twist your arm up. You think about your body and look, connected by a rope. Your arm, you can imagine as a rope, and no matter how many times you keep twisting it, that rope doesn't get tangled up, which is a little bit strange when you think about it that way, conceptually. So that's an example of what I mean by something that our body can naturally do, the mind finds a little bit strange. And along those lines, there's an experiment you can do at home, which I actually found pretty mind-blowing the first time I did it, which is that you can take any object, anything that's lying around your house, take it and just tie as many strings as you want from that object to different points in the room. You could tie 3 strings, 4 strings, 100 strings to different points in your room. And after doing that, if you rotate the object 360 degrees, what will happen? Obviously the strings are going to get totally tangled up, right? But the surprising thing is that if you then keep rotating the object another 360 degrees, the strings, no matter how many there are, you'll be able to untangle. So that, and you should try this. You can actually do this, taking any object and taking strings and tying them. And initially I found it a little bit hard to believe, but it actually works. So it's actually a very fundamental property of space. It's not that we can do this because of some strange quirk of our body. It's really something about space itself that we can connect as many things as we want. 360 degrees tangles them up, but doubling 720 degrees, suddenly the strings can come undone. So there's something going on there. And so this is something that I've always found really interesting, and something that I've wanted to kind of explore more. And the kind of...
Vijay, you may have to use the microphone better because you are cutting out.
Okay. Maybe I'll go back to headphones. Okay, I hope can people hear me? Cool. So yeah, maybe just another quick experiment that you can each do, which will give you a slightly better sense, I hope, of what we're talking about, is you can actually just close your eyes and kind of forget where you are in the world. Forget your position on Earth. Forget whether you're in the kitchen or the living room or the bathroom or in India or the US, or forget whether you're high up off the ground on the 10th floor or on the ground floor. Basically forget your position in space and just imagine it's just you and the Earth below you. And basically, thanks to gravity pulling you towards the Earth, even though your eyes are closed, you still know exactly how your head is situated, how your head is oriented in space. So if it's tilted back or tilted forward or to the right or to the left, however it's oriented in space, you'll still have an awareness of that. So you can try moving your head around and feel how, just forget your visual sense completely. If you just completely forget about your visual sense and your visual input, forget your position, but just as you move your head around, see if you can register the orientation of your head in space, how it's situated. And see how much freedom you have to move it around, how many degrees of freedom, and without moving your body, just moving your head. And And as you do that, if you're able to really forget your visual sense, you're now living in projective space, where your only input is that orientation of your head. Basically, you've become what's something called a gyroscope, something that only registers its orientation in space and doesn't know anything else. And it's a fun thing to play with. So this is kind of how Joshua and I also started out, just playing with this information. If this is the only information we have, if we block off all the other information, what can we do with it? And what kind of space do we build from only that information? What does this projective space actually look like? What is the shape of it? What can we say about it? And maybe you can open your eyes now. Another surprising thing is that we can, it's more, there's a lot more we can say about it than you might think. So because our head is attached to our neck and it's a little bit hard to get full freedom of movement, it can be useful to use a puppet, like a ball, to do experiments on projective space. And one way to understand projective space is to just imagine that any point in projective space is one orientation of this head. So this is a point of projective space. This is a point of projective space. This is another point of projective space. This is another point. So each orientation of this head in space gives you a different point. And as you move from one point to another, you're tracing out paths in projective space. You can also do it with your head, of course, from this position. You can find many different paths that'll take you back to that position. You find many loops, is another way to say it, in projective space. Or with a puppet, you have even more freedom. You could find loops in projective space like this one, or this one, which are really swiveling around in ways that your head can't even do. So you can start to explore projective space with the help of a puppet even more than with your own head. But what's interesting is that there's a feature of projective space that really gives us this property that we were discussing earlier, that you can keep turning around indefinitely without getting tangled up. And the key to seeing that is to really look at these loops in projective space. So, you can do it with your puppet or you can do it with your head, but basically, again, a loop is just starting with one orientation, letting your head move around and coming back to that. And that's what we call a loop, because its base, the place it starts and the place it finishes, is the same. So from the perspective of projective space, that's a loop in the space. And there's many types of loops, obviously. I mean, there's kind of uncountably many ways of creating loops. You can pick any base point, pick any starting orientation, and you can make your loop as crazy as you want. Or you can make it as simple as you want. You can even just have a stationary loop. You can imagine a loop by starting, say, a stopwatch, and the timer starts, and then it ends, and you find yourself back where you started. But a stationary loop, the timer would start, and the head wouldn't move at all. Nothing actually changes. So a loop can be that simple, or it could be much more complicated. And the thing that we started exploring with movement was which loops are trivial and which loops are non-trivial. And the trivial loops are just the ones that you can bring back to a stationary loop by incremental changes. So you can keep smoothly deforming them, keep performing them over and over, smoothly deforming it, incrementally changing it little by little, and bring it back to something stationary. So an example of that is just a small wobble. So if we start here, a loop might look like this, and we repeat it, and then we repeat it again, but smaller, and then a little bit smaller still, and a little smaller still, and a little bit even smaller and smaller, until it becomes just a tiny wobble, and then finally it is nothing at all. So through these incremental changes, we've gone from a loop that had some movement to it to something that was completely still. And That way you can get from one loop to another by repeating it over and over and slowly, slowly changing it. So that's, and any loop that we can bring back to a stationary loop is what we call a trivial loop, what we had in the title of the piece. So in a sense, Joshua was exploring what kinds of journeys these trivial loops can go on without, and smoothly, changing through these small incremental changes. And, an example of such a loop is for example, so the 360-degree rotation that we did. That's not a trivial loop, because no matter how many times you do it, no matter how many times you change it, you're never going to be able to bring it back to a stationary loop. You can change it a little bit here, a little bit there, and as you keep changing it, you'll get to loops that are, you can bring this 360-degree rotation to this 360-degree rotation, for example, but you can never bring it to a stationary loop. But one thing that was very surprising is that you can actually watch a 720-degree loop, something that goes around twice, coming back to a stationary loop. And you can actually do that very easily with your body again, just by using the power of figure 8 in the middle. So if you imagine a 720-degree rotation, imagine this 720-degree rotation. It goes 360 degrees, and then your arm gets tangled. You can't really keep going. But if you let your arm go off to the other side of you, you can actually see it and do a full 720-degree rotation. So, and if you keep repeating that, incremental changes, you slowly turn that into a figure 8. And that figure 8 becomes smaller, till it's just basically a wobble. And finally, it settles down to being completely stationary. So, yeah, so maybe I'm going a bit too heavy on the math. So I think I'm going to bring this back to a regular discussion with everyone. But basically, that idea is really powerful, because it turns out that every loop you can explore in projective space is either trivial or non-trivial. It either comes back to a stationary loop like that, or it doesn't. And that explains a lot of, that explains how these spaces, which we are really used to dealing with, are also fundamentally different from anything we can kind of wrap our head around, our conscious kind of mind around. So, okay, I think, okay, I think I'm also not being heard. I'm getting some messages now. So, okay, let me just open this up. Maybe Joshua, do you want to talk a little bit about how you interpreted these ideas?
So when, I don't know, wait, can people see me, hear me?
Oh, sorry. Cancel spotlight. Yeah, I think you can be seen now.
Okay, cool. So for me coming into this as a dancer, what's really cool about it is being able to think of the spaces that we're moving through. I feel like a lot of dancers inherently know how to move, and we take a lot of our joints for granted. Like our joints, like I'm really mind blown as we were going through this week in terms of like how smart our body construction is in terms of the sockets, the joints, because for example, things like this, your shoulder is constantly rolling with you to make room for that. Otherwise, as Vijay demonstrated, we would just get tangled within ourselves. So just the way our body is so smart in organizing itself. So that's something I was really interested in, and also exploring that as we shifted in space. And I'll do a short demo if you guys want to join me in that. One of that is like, a lot of times I feel like when dancers do use space or geometry to improvise or create phrases, I feel like we think of only very basic or rudimentary shapes. Like, okay, I'm going to make a circle. So we just think this, like a very basic circle. But actually we can start thinking of shapes and the body around us as a 3D sphere, as it actually is, instead of just collapsing everything into 2D, like the projection you saw in the piece, like the shadow, just remains in this 2D realm. So everything kind of like goes in this direction. So when dancers create, I feel like a lot of times our imagination is so limited by what we are able to see. Because, okay, I know the shape of a triangle, so I can dance in a triangle in many different ways. But what if it's more complicated, like a triangle? If you extrapolate that into a 3D space, it becomes a prism. So I can move more complex through that whole 3D object. So this was something I found really useful in choreography and composition, and also improvisation. So shall we do, if people are interested, I have a very short and easy thing we can do at home, and it's become part of our weekly warm-up as well. It's a great way to move your body and also cool down, get you ready for bed. Like just a nice meditative movement, and you will see trivial loops happening in space if you don't mind joining me. Like, you can watch and observe, or it's better if you go along with me if you wish. So I'll just demonstrate super quickly. So if whoever is joining is willing to stand and explore this with us, a trivial loop. So yeah, cool. I see a few people getting up. Nice. So if you stand here and you just drop your head to the side, and just pick it back up to kind of bring it back up. So imagine you have two circles or two fish bowls. Imagine there's two fish bowls right beside your head. So you're just tracing the edge of that fish bowl on one side, drop it from below, and trace the edge of that fish bowl. So you're making two circles. So two very basic 2D shapes. So you're just allowing it to drop. Pick it back up. Imagine you have a pencil on the top of your head. So you're just drawing two circles, one on this side, you drop it and make it up on the other side, and until it starts to join and it becomes an infinity symbol. You know that infinity symbol? Yeah. So now we have this 2D shape. You can slowly make it as big as you want or as your body is prepared. Just allow the rest of your body to just follow it. Yeah. Try not to stare too much at the screen or just listen to my voice. Yeah. So now that you have this flat figure of 8 going laterally, think that you're now in this 3D object. So as it goes down, think of shifting your head a little bit to the back. And as you drop it down, think of your head going a little bit to the back again. So think of your head going a little bit to the back until you start coming into a diagonal position, but still keeping that side-to-side figure of 8. And just keep following it. So let your head drop to the back one way, coming up, drop to the back, drop to the back, and allow your spine to just follow, your legs and your hips are just following the motion of these two spheres, of these two circles, and now suddenly, that simple figure of 8 or 2 circles is something a little bit more complex that your body is swimming through. And it's just a super nice warm-up or movement exploration. And if you bring it slowly, make the circles smaller and smaller, like incrementally. If you just keep making it a little bit smaller, I'm doing it quite fast. So just make it a little bit small, smaller. This is essentially still that same shape or the same loop until it becomes a wobble. So it's still the same shape or the same starting position. We've just extrapolated that loop until it becomes a wobble and stationary, finishing that trivial loop. So in essence, this point of stillness carries with it that big loop that we just did. So stillness can become a motion, and also your motion can become way more complex than just 2D shapes. So here, we travel through this whole 3D shape here, over here. And also in your stillness, you can imagine all of those pathways still circulating. start it again. And it's essentially the same groove becomes more and more complex. So from a simple place, you can start exploring really cool movements that come out, or just have fun with it in your improvisation and exploration. And I think this just defines how we can move through space. Instead of usually like a four-walled room, we can just start imagining that landscape to be a little bit more fun, like curves and edges, or more organic. So it's just a way to relate to the body and also the space around us. So that's something I really got excited and geeked out about, and also in future compositions and choreographies, something I'm dying to apply and like see how these changes shift. So that was our little take-home experiment that you can do. And yeah, I'm done with what I have to say.
Awesome. Do you guys have any other questions, or should we
call it a night?
This is great. I enjoyed it very much. Joshua, I'm Jagu. I'm Vijay's uncle. And this is fantastic. I really enjoyed the whole performance and the explanation.
Thanks, Jagu.
Thank you. But yeah, before we hold you on for any longer, I'll just say thank you all very much for logging in and being a part of us and committing your time and presence through this virtual act and performance, and witnessing what it is to bring math and dance together. And I hope this was somewhat fun and engaging. And one thing, like, there's so many people from all around, and this is just something I've been really appreciative of. So I just want to say thank you, even though we're in different spaces and places all over the world, to be able to congregate and share one space, be it virtual, together and commit this time. There's like so much commitment and engagement, and that's something really powerful beyond the performance and beyond our circumstances. So thank you for being part of it. Vijay and I will stay around just to talk and chit chat and whatever. If people need to leave, do so. Like, you're under no binding obligation. But I just wanted to say thank you, everyone, for joining us. And if you have time to stay, do stay, chat. We can just talk and chill, and yeah, ask questions or just hang out. Yeah. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks. But we'll be here.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Vijay, also for committing your time this week.
Thank you, Josh. And thanks, everyone. Gurbhat, did you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to know what music you used. The first.
Oh yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned that. Yeah, so it was actually music that the first song was something you introduced me to. Balake Sissoko and Vincent Segal. So that's probably why it sounded familiar. And the second song was Spiegel im Spiegel by Arvo Part.
It was really amazing. I think the concept is non-trivial. I mean, not in the sense that you use trivial, non-trivial loops in, but I think it did clarify. And I mean, I understand something that I think is a little non-trivial to wrap our heads around. But yeah, thank you, both of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to say also, I found the concept of thinking of motion as loops really interesting, and it's quite hard to wrap my head around. I love these examples of like starting with a big loop and shrinking it down, because that is helpful. And I was wondering, and maybe this is a question more for you, Vijay, if there is a way, that like, or maybe this is just what you do, is there a way to like animate these or visualize these so that you can actually see them as loops?
So it's a bit difficult. I thought about that. Like, the problem is to see them as, they're loops in projective space. And it's easiest to understand projective space if we actually forget our visual kind of, it's hard. We can't embed projective space in our three-dimensional world. That's the problem.
I see. And it's not even 2D or 3D or something.
3D. Projective space is 3D. It's a three-dimensional space. But it can't, because it's twisted up in a way, so you can't actually fit it inside our three-dimensional world. So that kind of visualization you're asking for, it's possible to do it by projecting it down, but in that process of projecting, I feel you lose some intuition. So in a way, you actually, this way for me, even though, I think I went through it really quickly, but in a way, I think if you go through these exercises slowly, you can build some. I feel the best way to get intuition for projective space is actually this kind of tactile sense that you get with your body. I kind of feel that more and more the more that I thought about it and worked on these kinds of exercises. So yeah, but I would really like to try. I mean, I can do animations that are, abstracted simplifications or like projections, but I can't do an animation of the thing itself. It just doesn't.
I see.
You use lights and do it in dark. Would that? I mean, it still wouldn't. I guess. I don't know, like if say Joshua was holding some, I don't know, like an LED something, and then it's like a darker, would the loop be more visible in that?
That's an interesting idea to have some trail, like a LED or like even a cloth or something. So I think basically this might be again too technical, but there's two kinds of loops happening. There's one that he's painting in space for us to see, but there's another loop that he's experiencing like almost inside himself in terms of his orientation in space. That his orientation in space is making a different loop, which kind of coincides with the loop he's drawing in some sense, but most of the time, but not always. So, I mean, you can draw the loop he's drawing can kind of come out more with LEDs or with some cloth, but in some sense, that's actually a projection of the loop that he's experiencing in projective space inside his head. So in a way, that's literally kind of a projection of that loop he's experiencing in his head. So that's an interesting idea. I think that could be something we try in this week, and that could definitely be an interesting element to kind of add into this dance because it's another form of projection also. Joshua, you're on mute.
Yeah, that would be a really cool development of this idea Vijay and I were saying. And also part of why I'm doing this virtual act is also because, when you start, it takes an act to start an idea. And then once you start, it just has a life of its own that starts building and building momentum. I can think it up, but there's a limit to that and experiencing it. And part of that is this, the more we did it, the more we said, oh, if we had more time, this. Oh, if we had a bigger budget, this. Because I feel like a lot of the times, yes, I'm a dancer, I take movement for maybe granted or my joints and stuff, as I've said before. And also for math, what we discovered was, and also I talked to other friends who study math and do all these things. A lot of them know theoretically how movement should happen, or like if this is the function, how does the movement happen in a X, Y, Z axis kind of thing, but not many people travel that space. And also as dancers, the easiest way to think of motion is our visual power, like through a visual sense, like, okay, I'm going to travel through this room or through this corridor, but that's always 2D, like it's always flat, like I'm seeing all of you in a 2D surface. So thinking of shapes as 3D or movement through a 3D loop, although it's happening, is a very cool concept that's definitely worth further investigation or like transforming or finding that middle ground between this math and that. So yeah, definitely something. And maybe Vijay, if you want, you can share that video you made for me.
Oh, yeah. So by the way, I did make some animations when I was explaining homotopes and these kind of incremental changes of this. So if you want, I can just show that right now. So here's an example of a trivial loop. Just opening it. Can everyone see? So this is the type of loop we can draw on a paper or in space. And this is it's incrementally changing and going to nothing and then expanding out again. So through this smooth deformation, it goes to nothing and then to something big. So that's a way of saying so that's what we mean by a trivial loop, something that can be contracted or smoothly deformed or kind of incrementally changed into nothing. So that's one example of a trivial loop. And another trivial loop that is in a different space is right here. This is a trivial loop can you see it? In the torus. Are you seeing, did it come up? No. Oh no, it didn't come up. Okay, one second. Sorry. change the share. Okay, yeah, and this is another trivial loop, but on a surface on the torus. And you can see it doesn't matter if the loop kind of winds around the edges of the torus; it still can be contracted back to nothing. It can still be incrementally changed back to nothing. So that's another example of a trivial loop. Oh, are you guys seeing it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. And just to give an example of a non-trivial loop, just to give a sense of what else is possible, here's an example of a non-trivial loop. And here you can see that this loop, if you can see it, it's no matter how much you incrementally change it or deform it, because it's going around that sleeve of the torus, it's never going to go back to nothing. It's never going to contract to that point. You can wiggle it around. You can do these homotopies, they're called. You can kind of keep making incremental changes and move it from this loop to that loop. There's many different loops you can you can change it into many different types of loops. But no matter what, you're going to be going around that sleeve of the torus, and you're never going to be able to contract it back to nothing. So this is a non-trivial loop. So the analogy in projective space, if you remember, a non-trivial loop is one that does a 360-degree rotation. So it's like the timer starts, and then so that's a non-trivial loop in projective space. And no matter how many times you keep changing it little bit, you're never going to make it the stationary loop, which is just stationary loop, which doesn't do anything. No matter how much you change it, you'll never get to that. So that was the analogy that we were making. I mean, it's the same thing, but in different settings.
Yeah, can I speak?
Yeah.
Congrats, guys! It's so nice. Like I love both of like the understanding the maths after seeing it. So it's so interesting, and I felt the presence was so on Josh. Like it was like so there, and I think the way it's structured just brought to such an authentic and genuine presence, like at dance wise, like interpretative wise, and the shadow really helped for like put that. That was a brilliant idea, by the way, and like hearing like Vijay not talking about the loose, I'm like, oh, I think I spot the trivial or the non-trivial, like looking back into it. So it's so nice to see the potential for vulnerability as well to emerge through mathematics. Like who would have thought? But at the same time, it's so logical. Like when you look at the stars, like it's just, I was at camp recently, I was just looking at the stars like, wow, I feel so vulnerable. But then there's something about the mathematics of it, like, which just, I don't know, like it brought me into this space and I was with you. And like the second song was very beautiful, actually. Like I was having like a bit of goosebumps, but then it's like you in your I don't know, your living room, but then it's so beautiful to see that. And then understanding where it comes from, like from this place of like just pure loop. I don't know, it was very touching. Thank you both for that.
Thank you.
Oh, you're on mute, Josh.
Joshua, you're on mute.
And thanks, John, for saying that. It's nice to always hear your thoughts. But also, this is something I was telling Vijay the other day, day before, about how sometimes we always think math is so, this is the equation, this is the answer. But just like dance or anything that's more art related, like it can be so abstract, and also it's just understanding patterns and behaviors. So it's just kind of like an exploration in and of itself. So I feel like it's such a cool way to reframe or rethink about things that we think are so set in stone, or like some things that are so factual or scientifically based. By that I mean something that can be proven. Just because it can be proven or it can be written down doesn't mean it loses its ability to be explored or to, I don't know, to change and be, I don't know, like vulnerable within it, because there's this thing of unknown, like I don't know how this loop is gonna emerge or how it's going to be or how it's going to transform. So in that I think math, science, and dance even, or humanities are just much more related than we think, and we just love making a divide, you know. We just love making a divide. So yeah, I think there's much more to connect there.
Yeah, and the surrender also, like you were such in a surrender place at one point, or just there. When you were doing the ends, like it was like mesmerizing, like just like what's gonna happen, but then it wasn't forced. Like it just felt like it's a bit of exhaustion as well. I noticed like it's soft exhaustion. almost like, but then it brought to it made me think of what we did about exhaustion, but like in this more yin place, like very soft place, but it's still exhaustion, like in a different way, surrendering exhaustion. So it was very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to say again, it was just it's been an amazing week because just every day there was just so many amazing ways that Josh kind of interpreted these ideas and just brought them to life in ways I couldn't have imagined or couldn't have kind of dreamed of. So it was really bringing this exploration of math and exploration of dance together in a very playful but really sincere and really heartfelt and moving way. Like it, I mean, there's many times when I was watching him dance when I felt myself tearing up almost. So it was it was really it's been a really wonderful week.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's amazing.
Thanks, Purva.
Yeah. Thanks, Purva.
Vijay, I was just going to say too, it was very touching, and somehow it felt more. Yeah, it was emotional. So in a good way.
Mm. Oh, thanks. That's my mom, by the way.
Oh, hi.
Hi, I'm hiding.
Yeah, thanks. So,
More stuff.
sorry, Purva?
Be doing more stuff. I mean, like, hope we'll get to see more exploration.
Yeah, I would definitely be excited to kind of keep the exploration going and kind of see where it goes next. It's already gone on such a journey, so
Yeah.
I feel like it won't just end. We'll see.
Yeah, we shall see.
Yeah.
Because even just today, as we logged on, I was like, oh, I wish we had more time. I want to do projections and create optical illusions to transform this flat wall into something like, using lines like, those contour lines of like geography that or architects use, through that, like redefining spaces. So yeah, there's a lot of room. And this is what I love about acting out or like just starting something is it just begets more ideas. So we'll see. Anyway, shall we wrap up if there's no more thoughts coming in?
Okay, I just would like to say one thing. I think in this all exploration, you're ignoring all the world that you created on the wall that plays based on totally different rules than all this math that we talked in physical world, right? So I think there is totally one more different separate world with different effects that happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, I don't question that or negate that. But why we put that on there is just that just to see. I don't know, Vijay, if this was your idea, but he just said, let's get shadows. But for me, that's just a way of flattening the experience. Like this is happening, but on the wall, it's a different journey. Definitely that, but also that's what I meant by I wish we had more time to see, because there's so much to explore still. And something I learned from this exploration or doing this virtual act is more on how to develop ideas further. Say it was a full-length piece on like, not just think about movement or dance, choreography and composition, but in terms of what are the other implications, the space, the costuming ideas, like all that world. Like, of course, like my interaction with the shadow itself, that's something that's worth doing, but we only spent like an hour, 2 hours every day. So we just said, let's work on this part. So, but yeah, that's, the shadow is really cool.
And definitely, I think I think that was something that I was thinking about a little bit, like what are the laws and logic of this shadow world on the wall. But I think it's something that, as you said, it's something that's very different in a way. So, but it still does function in a strange way. It connects with a lot of the things that are happening outside of the shadow world, because in the end, everything we're understanding is through these projections. Like even this projective space I'm describing is itself, if you're just focused on the projective space created by your head, even that is a projection of, because really your mind is keeping, your brain is keeping track of, the orientation of each and every body part in your body at any point in time. And if you could actually think of that, it's that entire collection as a very, very high dimensional space. I mean, you could probably calculate the exact dimension of it, and it must be, I don't know, 100 dimensional or 200 dimensional space. Somebody should actually, I wonder if somebody's done this calculation. But if you that space of all the orientations of your entire body, whenever we bring our awareness to, what's happening in terms of the spatial orientation of our head or our hand, that itself is also a projection. So in a way, every exploration we make is based in projections. So it's kind of, yes, there are definitely more. I mean, I think we do need to explore those rules more, but somehow, yeah, it just kind of came into being the way it did. So
it's also the shadow, because we don't see his face. It kind of, I was watching sometimes the shadow for minutes, and I was like, oh, there's still Joshua to watch. But then it gets you in this world, and it's very mathematical also, because there's no, I'm not saying math don't have emotion, that's what I'm not implying that, but there's something about just the body and no facial expression that's very, as an audience member, I'm very attracted instantly. So like, I thought maybe there would be 1, 2, 3, like millions of shadows, and then maybe the shadow is the real Joshua, who knows? Like there's something there very interesting to dig as an exploration.
Yeah, and I think I also felt this way, that for whatever reason, it doesn't always feel that Joshua is casting the shadow. It feels sometimes the shadow is casting Joshua. So
absolutely.
And it doesn't, sometimes it even looks like it's doing something slightly different from what he's doing. in a sense, very intriguing. So, yeah.
Wonderful work, guys.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Great time. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye, everyone. It's really great.